Richard, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. I think what you're doing is special, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thanks.
Thank you. So, why is protecting privacy so important? If I'm a Gen Z and all my information is out there, why should I care?
First of all, everybody's expectation of privacy is different. Your expectation is different from mine, is different from your mother's or your father's, your sisters, your brothers, your families. I never met two people who have the same expectation of privacy, but we all have one. We all absolutely have one. And what I love to ask people is, would you be happy if your browser history was seen by your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mother, your father, your sister, your neighbor, your aunt, there, and automatically you get a feel of, oh, wait a minute, now we're talking about, and so it's where does that privacy line start? Your first name, last name, okay, who cares? Where you were born, how old you are, who cares? Who cares? But there's data that starts to get sensitive to you, whether it's your browsing history or your medical history, your medical, but everybody's got that. And the idea is to know, the objective is to know where your personal line in the sand is. What information is what I feel uncomfortable about? And I tell you what I always say is my family knowing, because your family knows you. And if there's something that you'd be worried that your family knew about you, that's a sure thing that you want to keep that private, no matter what that is. Now that could be, but you take that on a bigger and take that information into society where there are business entities and government entities, community entities that are, that you're sharing information with, not just your first name or last name, but, I don't know, where you were a week ago Friday at 3 o'clock from your GPS location, and then move that down the line. If that's not where, well, where were you yesterday, last night? What route did you drive home from? Because your car picks up that and delivers that to the car manufacturer, who shares and sells that information. So you get, okay, well, I'm not sure I care if people know how I drove home or when I drove home. But you start to play out these scenarios where and move into different sets of information. Your identity information is one thing, your name, your address, but then you move that identity to medical information. Are you asthmatic? Are you a hemophiliac? Your dental information, and move it on down to you get to maybe your DNA. You start sharing information that in the event that it became public, may or may not be immediately a danger to you, but in the long run could work to your detriment. And I think that's what's missing today is people don't know their immediate level of privacy. Everybody says, who cares? Who cares about Jeff Bezos collecting information on me when I use Amazon? Who cares? But I tell you, you would care if you took the time to look at it. Read Amazon's privacy statement. Start right there. Read Amazon's privacy statement and understand that by not even ordering anything by Amazon, maybe you're looking for a trip to go to the Amazon and you land on the wrong site and you go to Amazon.com. Without asking your permission, they put a cookie in your browser that collects all the data on that device, what applications you're running, okay, what's in your browsers, where you've been, what your whole internet browsing history. They suck that up and send it back to Jeff Bezos at Amazon. It says this clearly in their privacy statement. What applications you're running? Are you running, how much you play YouTube, or how much you use Google? What your Google search is? What Instagram accounts? Facebook, LinkedIn. It's a Hoover, vacuum that takes all that information, sends it to Amazon. They put it in their database. They take your GPS location that was taken from the desktop or from whatever device you connected to Amazon with, cross-reference that, get your street address, and then put it in and submit and get your credit record.
Hmm.
So now, listen to what I'm saying. For landing on Amazon, Jeff Bezos has all that information about you and your credit record. Why? To provide you a better customer service. Now, we've already been into that. That's, Amazon's the biggest retailer on the face of the planet. And we've let that go and nobody questions that as business as usual. And you understand that your personal data is taken from you for business purposes and commoditized for revenue generation. Now, what Jeff does with that, God only knows.
Mhm.
If you looked at that, that would really scare you. But that's his model. His model is not selling you a book or an album or a some kind of streaming service, although Amazon Prime does really well. His basic model is selling you and I and where we were and our geolocation and our credit records. And it's we're living in a time where data, personal data, is monetized. Now,
Right.
okay, now back to your original question, why should we be worried about this?
Yep.
Because there's going to come a day when that data about you or I, no matter how, innocuous, undangerous it seems, is going to be used and it's going to affect your life. Um, and you should care. Because when it's gone, it's gone. It's gone. It's like, it's a binary condition. Once you lose that data,
Mhm.
whether it's your name and address or your DNA, you'll never get it back. You're never going to put that genie back in the bottle.
Mhm.
So as a generation, I'm very concerned about Gen Z's lack of attention to how that, you know, that data that's taking from them on that social media platform,
Mhm.
whether it's X or it's, Instagram or whatever it is, in the future might come back and they might regret sharing it with, that platform.
Yep. Is it a lack of attention or is it a lack of immediate impact? Because if I'm using Amazon.com and now Jeff Bezos has my credit rating or credit report, my response to that is okay, but I don't see immediate impact. Like my daily life is not being
Yep.
altered physically, digitally, or socially. Like my reputation isn't going underwater, etc. So,
Yet.
right.
No, you're right. And it is a question of immediacy. If it doesn't affect you in the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who cares? You have a tendency of, to say it should have no impact. Let me give you an example. And this is from my niece, who's a millennial. Okay. And 15 years ago, while she was in her 20s, she went off to China to work for an NGO on a water project. Okay. And her mother, my sister, and her were communicating back and forth whenever she could get into town to get Wi-Fi access, to get on Facebook and say, "Hi, Mom. Here's what I'm doing. I'm okay." And they would, anyway, they were communicating on Facebook, back and forth, back and forth. And one year while she was out there, she picked up she picked up a chest cold that settled in her chest, and she was always coughing, and she couldn't, it was just terrible. So she and her mother, my sister, were going back and forth and talking about herbal remedies. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Because she couldn't get antibiotics because she was living in a small Chinese village that had no medical care. And so they were going back and forth and talking about things that she could do to all right. Anyway, the infection ran its course, and after about a month and a half, it just disappeared, which it does. All right. Flash forward, she comes back to the United States, and 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 years later, she's working as a teacher. She finds herself pregnant and applies for health care, and she gets turned down. And she said, "Well, I'm a non-smoker, I'm a vegetarian, I'm athletic, I've had no history of heart disease or cancer or any of these things in my genetic line. So what is the problem?" But she keeps getting turned down. Bupa turns her down. All of these big, Kaiser Permanente turns her down. And after about 10 care providers turn her down, she files a Freedom of Information Act to saying, "I don't understand why you're turning me down for healthcare." And she's pregnant. She needs healthcare. She needs prenatal care. She needs postnatal care. She needs, maternal. And the point of the story is that after a long, prolonged battle, she gets, I think it was Bupa, who says, "Well, here's why. You are prone to asthma, and you are asthmatic and prone to emphysema, and you're hiding it from us." And she said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And they turned over the data, literally the line by line going back and forth, entries that she put on Facebook that she wrote to her mother, what was 7 years earlier. So Bupa, so Mark Zuckerberg took that transaction between a mother and daughter and sold it to a healthcare provider. And my niece to this day cannot get health insurance. Why? Because of what she said on Facebook to her mother about helping me cure an infection that I have. And that's the best example I can give you about how at the time Facebook was a blessing to her. She could
Mhm.
communicate to her mom on the other side of the world, and yet 7 years later she cannot get health insurance because of something she wrote on social media, which was a point in time. She is not asthmatic. She is not prone to emphysema, and it is in fact altered the course of her life. And she had a baby without health care. It was a mess, and should they paid for it out of pocket, it was a terrible burden. Why? Because Mark Zuckerberg sold that information between a mother and a daughter, and we don't connect those dots.
Mhm.
And that's what I mean by you want to protect your privacy. You have to understand. You got to put that into a context to where that can come something. Now, at the time you wouldn't think you talking to your mother about I'm not feeling well is private, especially on a Facebook platform. Who the heck reads that?
Mhm.
It's a direct channel. No, not to Mark Zuckerberg, because he monetized that and sold it to a healthcare provider who does blacklisting, to reduce the risk of claims. That's it. That's how the way the world goes around. And that was 15 years ago.
So Richard, what do we use then? Is it I can't use Facebook, I can't use Instagram, no Meta products, no Google products. Is Apple okay?
There is no okay. See, this is the problem, Ish. There is absolutely an okay, and that's why this issue about how much okay is okay. It's
Right.
got to be a personal decision about how much you bite in to a platform and what you use it for. And like I said, you want to use Amazon? Use Amazon. Do yourself a favor and read the terms, the privacy terms, and understand what happens to your data, and then make the decision. And
Mhm.
maybe you have no problem with that. That's up to you. Maybe you have no problem with Jeff Bezos knowing your credit score. And you're right. At one hand, who cares? Or knowing, but he also knows your browser history, and he also knows what you're using and not using on your laptop. He knows your laptop history. He knows all the cookies that you have. So he knows who you are. Now, that data to Amazon might not affect your life, but what Amazon does with that and how they sell that on to, whether that's a government entity or another private business that you might be interacting with in the future, that you'll find, I don't understand why I can't get that car loan, or I don't qualify for that job position, or whatever it is. There's no privacy on any of those platforms. So you can't, I'm not in a position to advocate one's better than the other, but everyone requires a conscious decision by the user
Mhm.
to understand what is being traded. How much of my skin, sorry, I had a
Go
lot of
for it.
coffee today. Do
No
you
worries.
do you know that there's an Indian tribe? When I
Mhm.
was a kid, I used to be fascinated by American Indians, and there's an Indian tribe that used to be afraid that if you took their picture, it would take a little bit of their soul, and so they hated to be photographed because they didn't understand photography, and they'd see the picture and feel like, the photograph stole the piece of their soul. And it's called kleptography, the fear of having your picture taken,
Mhm.
based on this, that it takes a little something from you. That's what the internet does. Every time you log on, it takes a little piece of you, whether you know it or not. And maybe it just takes skin or something that doesn't hurt. But after a while, you don't know until you know, until you apply for health care and you can't get it and you don't know why. Because you and I, our personal data is monetized and sold, and we don't seem to care about that.
Not yet. Not yet.
Not
And
yet.
I've listened to Tristan Harris give this example of the voodoo doll. As you use a
Yeah.
social media site more and more, they get to construct that voodoo doll more, create a profile of you, and are able to advertise to you in a more direct and personalized manner. Is
That's
that
your
accurate?
algorithm. No, that's very, that's the voodoo valve that becomes, that is your a result of your algorithm, who you are, what you do, where you go, to determine where you will go, all of that information. No, no, very accurate, extremely accurate. And what you're asking me is, does it matter that someone out there has a voodoo doll that can predict your next move and hurt you with that information? My answer is most certainly. That we're well down that route as a society, and we're not going to change that. And telling somebody not to use this app or not to use that app, there are so many things you could do to reduce that profile. to reduce that footprint that you leave behind, that digital footprint, that digital DNA that you and I leave on the web every time we use the internet.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, it's still there. It's still there like a photograph. And in the wrong hands, that voodoo doll can cause you a lot of pain.
So in order to deconstruct that voodoo doll, what steps do we have to take? Is it just using ad blockers? Is it being picky on the sites that we're surfing on? Is it being picky on the information that we put on those sites, or is it something just way beyond that?
It first of all, understand, from either your first port of call is your browser.
Mhm.
Understand what's in your browser and why. The cookies that are in your browsers that you allow in your browsers track what you do and where you go and what you do on the internet. So if it were me, if I was starting from scratch, I would first clear out my browser of everything that wasn't my bank, my social media platforms, if that's what you want a part of that, and get away, because most of the cookies in your browser are, and they're third party cookies. They're cookies that were given to Amazon, that Amazon put in your browser, and they got paid to do that because they're Amazon, and they put cookies that are, so you want to first do is cleanse all the people that you're sharing your data with
Yeah.
and bring that down to an absolute minimum. And then of course you want your bank cookies in your browser, and then configure your browser not to take any cookies, period. The beauty, the master, the idea that this is a cookie is a beautiful, it's spyware. That's what that is. It's labeled a cookie to make you and I feel comfortable about letting it in our browser, but it's an application that reports about what you do on the internet. That is what I call spyware.
Mhm.
All right, so first thing you had to do is clean that out, and then understand that every time you use a search engine to go out and look for something you want, whether it's tickets to a concert or to go to Amazon, that's a search engine that makes money off of taking what you're looking for and selling that. Okay, so that's Google. Google's the best example of that. $1 billion company who doesn't produce anything except they don't sell anything except what you and I do on the web. And you've got to, and that's that's probably one of the most powerful companies on the planet. And if that's not an example of how much our personal data is worth and what we do on the web, I don't know what is. But then the next thing you do, and there are search engines that are anonymous,
Mhm.
that look at Duck and Go, or Duck Duck
Duck,
Go, I
duck,
think
go.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
called.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, and they do not, they don't put cookies, and they let you use it and come. So there are, you can pick out then your portfolio of things. One is a VPN, a virtual private network. So when you connect to to an accredited website, it encrypts the traffic. So what you upload and download is not intercepted. But a good cleaning of your browser cookies, a good search engine that doesn't track you, and a VPN that connects and encrypts your data to and from is a minimum, a minimum. And then it's just that awareness. It's just that spidey sense of understanding whatever you do. You got to take time. I'm telling you, I have made the biggest converts in privacy by just telling them, read Amazon privacy notice, and if that doesn't scare you to death,
Mhm.
to understand what they do, how the reach, the depth, and breadth of what the information that they take from you for just landing on your site, I don't. Then there's no hope for you.
See, Richard, the problem is that I'm a Gen Z or I'm a Gen Alpha, and my attention span and ability to focus is already shot beyond belief. So you asking me to read Amazon's, privacy policy is good for you who can muster 3 to 4 minutes to at least absorb all of it and then critically think. But if I'm consuming TikTok for the last hour, and then I see this and I go and look at Amazon's privacy policy, I'm unable to take anything in. So how do we make it accessible?
Right. So remember, before I talk to you, I remember saying, I'm worried about coming across as an old angry man. And when I hear you say that, and I hear my grandsons say that, I think to myself, do you know what you're telling me? You're telling me that your attention span is short because you're hooked on applications that don't require a long attention span. All right,
Right.
whether it's TikTok or Instagram or immediate gratification, whatever it is that, all right. So, and this of course is why your algorithm is so easy to read and why you're fed. And it's like here, drugs, the first one is always free. And once you're hooked, you're hooked. And getting off is like detox. A digital detox is what your generation needs to understand. I'm sorry, but if you want to affect change, you're going to have to actually take the time to give the subject the attention it deserves. And so if you don't think it deserves it, well, good luck with your privacy and your personal information, your religious affiliation, your sexual preference, all of that is a roll of the dice and may or may not affect your future. But if you took, and yes, by the way, so the Amazon privacy notice is about 27 pages, and it takes about 9 clicks to get through it and then actually read it. So it's about a half hour to 45 minutes worth of investment. All right, and I'm giving you that as an example of if you read it once and understand that this is Amazon. Can you imagine
Mhm.
what the other yin yangs out there are taking from me? But this is the most reputable international e-commerce platform in the world, and they get away with this. And so I'm trying to save you a lot of time to say, take your time, take 45 minutes out of your busy life and read Amazon if you're worried about your personal privacy, and then you will see the world differently.
Right. Try to take some time between binging YouTube, Netflix, and TikTok to spend 45 minutes on Amazon to read the
And I guess
policy.
exactly. And what I'm saying is that maybe, just maybe, the return will be worth the investment.
Sure.
And you don't know that until you've made the investment. And if you finish reading, and I hate to keep banging on about Amazon, but if you finish reading that and you don't see the world differently, please give me a call. And then fine. Then stop listening to angry old men like me and get on with your life, because personal privacy has absolutely no place in your life. And good on you. You're one of the chosen few. And I wish you well. But it's not my experience of data. Personal data commoditized, sold, always comes back to haunt you. I mean, people make fun of, hey, don't upload that to Facebook and run for political office 20 years from now.
Mhm.
That is more true than, yeah, it's a cliche now, but it's more true than you care to believe.
Sure. I would describe you more as truth-seeking and experienced rather than angry and old. Um,
And
the
I thank you for that, because I was telling you earlier, I feel like that old man where when the ball bounces in your yard, you don't want to ask for it because he's going to give you a lecture about something, about ball safety or, kicking a ball safely. It is. I'm worried about, I don't mean to be cynical. I mean to be realistic. I've had I'm very disappointed in as I when I first met you and talked about the state of cybersecurity today.
Mhm.
It's, we've been doing this for 30 years and we are going, it seems like we're going out of our way to fail. And I think at the end of the day, that's because you and I as end users have failed to ask for more.
Right.
Yeah, everybody's losing our data and we don't seem to care. We don't seem to want them to protect it. And I don't understand that, because a lot of lives have been severely impacted by a loss of their personal data. And you don't know it until it happens to you. It's like seeing a car accident. You're like, man, you've never been in a car accident. You're like, well, whew, okay, I'm not worried about that. I don't wear seatbelts. Tell you, been in a car accident, you'll wear seatbelts for the rest of your life. That's a fact.
Well, I think to extend that metaphor, I think you were the person that was young and told the kids to not play with the ball near a single lane road. And now that road is, an 8-lane highway, and you're still telling those same children, guys, don't play with the ball, you are going to get hurt. And so extending, this metaphor or coming back to cybersecurity, how has the cybersecurity industry failed? I think we've already established that there is no such thing as cybersecurity, information security, the infosec, data privacy era is long gone. It's not even a conversation anymore. So how do we get this industry back on track?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that back up as a because that is for me the topic. This idea that there is such thing as security, privacy and security, that you can secure data. You can't. Is cybersecurity for me is an oxymoron. No such thing. It's like Microsoft works, it's like, fighting for peace. It's an oxymoron. It's self-contradicting. There's no such thing as a secure computer. Never was, never will be. Now, if you know that, both, if you're a business trying to protect your customer data, or you're just an end user trying to look after the data that you have on your phone or your laptop or your tablet, whatever, there is no such thing as a secure tablet or laptop or phone. There isn't. And cybersecurity, then, when I say it's an oxymoron, I say cybersecurity, the real definition is risk management. You identify the risks of losing your privacy in this instance. You minimize that to the greatest extent possible. Clean out your browser. Use a a non-tracking search engine. Use a VPN. You minimize it to something that's acceptable and will keep you out of traffic. Keep you out of harm's way. If by doing a minimum amount of things, and then you manage that from day to day to day. I don't know, read the privacy notice before you sign up for any, freaking app that comes along, and understand what the app takes from you, and then you'll start to develop an appetite for how much security is appropriate to your level of privacy. And I'm not advocating that you go out there and nail everything down. You don't have time for that in your personal life, and you want to get the benefits of social media platforms and all the other things that are out there. Absolutely. But you want to stay out of harm's way. And harm's way, you don't know what that is until you define it for yourself personally. And I'm honestly, it's things like asking yourself, what if somebody had access to my medical records? And put that in a worst case scenario. What if and today that could have such an impact that it's frightening to me that people don't do a short risk assessment to understand what is my level of privacy. Anyway, cybersecurity is finding that level of privacy. It's called risk management to minimize the risk that your breach is, and we have just failed miserably in it. Yes, our industry, the cybersecurity industry, protecting data from breaches, protecting data from unauthorized access, protecting data from hackers. We suck at it. We just terrible. We've had 30 years of experience, and you look at the breaches. Yahoo loses 3 billion accounts. First of all, I didn't know Yahoo had 3 billion users, but to
Likewise.
lose every single one of them, that's, you got to go out of your way not to just be neglecting the security of that data, the size of the breaches. Do you know that in the last year and a half, that we have globally lost over 17 billion personal records? Okay, well, so I'm just telling you that this is from countries and businesses who have mandatory disclosure laws, who, when they have a breach to their system and they lose personal data, they have to hold out their hands and report it. They have to make a public statement. And do you know that in the last year and a half, we've lost over 17 billion records? Now, how many people are on the planet?
Eight,
Yeah, 8 billion max. So
yeah, 8 billion.
we have lost over twice the amount of records than there are people walking around on the face of this planet.
How
So
is this not mainstream news?
it's out there. Google it. It's out there. It's look at the I told you, Yahoo alone was responsible for 3 billion of that.
Mhm.
3 billion out of 17 million, and look at the size, the amount and the impact on the breaches. So frankly, when I talk about cynicism, you could pretty much make a case for everybody's personal data has already been lost.
Mhm.
What is the impact? How is that going to hurt us in the future? Because when you lose twice the amount of records than there are people walking around on the face of the globe, just maybe you're not doing a good job. And so I'm extremely disappointed in the cybersecurity industry. We have been ineffective in identifying and preventing breaches of personal data.
How can we get the industry back on track? What starter steps need to take place?
I think, for me, I think that's you and me. This is the discussion we're having. What we need a consumer revolt. Do you know anybody who's lost their Yahoo account data? You know what? I probably not if you don't know anybody who still uses a Yahoo Mail, but Gmail is just the same. Facebook has lost your data 20 times, and it's publicized. It's made, now Facebook, X, Instagram, they have breaches daily. Okay, so if you're saying where do you start to affect real change? It starts in the grassroots. It starts with you. It starts with me. It starts like conversations like this. Aren't you sick of this?
Mhm.
Haven't you had enough? It's like I I draw a comparison to in my lifetime during the 70s and 80s. There was a guy who fought tirelessly for safety in automobiles, Ralph Nader. And Ralph Nader was a tireless advocate for safety because you know why? We were driving cars and you get in accidents at 20 miles an hour and people would be going through the windshield because we didn't even have safe seat belts
Hmm.
because Detroit didn't want to spend another dollar and a half, $2 to put in a canvas belt with a metal clasp to save people's lives. Why? There was no money in it.
Hmm.
Okay. And it took a consumer revolt to say we're tired of all of this, these needless deaths and these serious injuries happening in cars that could be prohibited. And flash forward 30 years later, we have airbags, we have shatterproof glass, we have not just seat belts but whole harnesses. I mean, the advances that we've made in the structural integrity of cars alone for safety purposes are all changed. Now, we did this. There was no money to be made by Detroit to sell a safe car. Nobody cared about that until people started losing loved ones in minor accidents, and you got a consumer revolt. So where I'm going with this is what we need clearly is to start when people are losing our data to start speaking up and say that's unacceptable. Amazon's you use Amazon, they've lost your data. They've lost it many, many, many times, but that seems okay with you because you've never said anything to it and you've signed their terms and conditions. So, maybe just maybe if you want to affect real change, start asking for it, start expecting it, and then start demanding it. No, this is unacceptable. You have lost my data. What are you going to do to compensate me? At a minimum. And for me, that's odd because, as Americans, we're a very litigious society. We take people to court for dropping coffee in our laps, but not for losing our DNA data. Why is
Hmm.
that?
So then, what is the worst case scenario regarding this data loss, data privacy, fiasco?
In what sense? The worst case, for me, the worst case is is going to be determined by the sensitivity of the data that I lost. Okay, and I'm making a case that businesses that we interact with are not protecting it. Certainly, the governments and communities are not protecting it in accordance with its level of sensitivity, its level of privacy that we feel, because we're not defining the level of privacy that we expect for our medical records versus our maybe the history that you've been had allergies versus your actual DNA yeah, would be different to you and I. But at the end of the day, it would still have this. It could still have the same impact on our lives. So until we understand the impact, we're not going to understand the immediacy of the problem, I think. You only need to look around to see the evidence of, and that's in the amount of breaches, the amount of data we've lost, continue to lose every single day, and the ineffectiveness of us as a society to A, prioritize that, and B, solve that problem. I'm starting to get, as I get old, I start to say, then let's make it a law. Let's make it a law that a business has to protect that information. Here's a better idea. When somebody sells your data, why don't you get a piece of that, like a royalty, like a
Hmm.
commission on a recording that you've just made? If
Hmm.
somebody sells your medical history, that's your history. It belongs to nobody else in the world. That's yours. You have a right to make a profit out of that. Why aren't we
Right.
looking and exploring ways to say, okay, we want to share data. Let's make sure everybody makes a little money on that, and
Mhm.
especially me as the data subject, the owner of that data.
Is this a realistic ask? Like, if we banded together, would
Yeah,
this
there
could
you
this
go.
actually be an
It's
outcome?
only realistic if consumers started to think, wait a minute, I want more. Wait
Right.
a minute, this is not good enough. It's funny that you and I, we buy a flat screen TV and it doesn't work. We take it back in a heartbeat. But
Mhm.
if we subscribe to an internet service provider and we get ransom malware, we get Trojan horses and denial of service stuff from our internet provider
Mhm.
who sends that stuff down to the pipe and puts it into our home and our businesses, why don't we pick up the phone and call them and say, I want my money back? I got a virus using your service.
Mhm.
Why do I do, that's unacceptable. You delivered that internet connection to me. That internet connection was full of viruses and Trojans and malware. It's had an impact on my home or my business. I want my money back. That's where it starts, is a consumer focus on quality of service, certainly from social media platform providers, but from the infrastructure that provides us the internet.
Mhm.
Is an internet that's sorry to get off on another tangent, but an
Go
internet
for it.
service provider sees all that crap that you and I get, from hackers and the spyware, the malware, because they're delivering it to our back doors. They get it, but here's the key: is they make money on that because they make money on bandwidth. And as you're downloading a piece of spyware, that's taking up bandwidth, and they're making money. They're charging you for that luxury. It doesn't make sense to me. If people actually looked at it, they'd starting to ask for security from businesses and from internet service providers, from managed service providers, from the people who gave us the laptops and the cell phones. In my generation, I saw BlackBerry come and go, where BlackBerry was about a secure mobile. Why aren't we asking for secure mobile applications? And understanding what in fact is what that constitutes. Everybody understanding Apple just well nobody but Apple sees that information. No, Apple and everybody they sell it to sees that information.
So
um,
encrypted is a joke. It's a non thing.
I don't want to say it's a joke. Encrypted on your personal device, things that you have identified are certainly. It is no joke. It is once again, it's one of those minimum things like encrypting traffic to and from. If you have personal device that you're storing long term on your mobile or your laptop or tablet, absolutely encrypting it. But I would not get. I'd look for an open source encryption tool,
Sure.
something, and not a pay for encryption tool like an RSA pay for it. Because if RSA loses that encryption code because somebody hacked into RSA, then you've just lost what you think is a secure little folder where all your secrets are held.
Richard, you speak with such passion and such experience. What is your
It's caffeine.
career?
It's caffeine induced.
I think it's augmented with caffeine, but I think there's, a lot other than the caffeine. But what has your career looked like? How did you get into this, and what was the, progression?
That's a good question. And I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you. I just somebody asked me that recently, and I thought about it. I'm an older guy. I'm at the end of my career. I'm in my 60s, and I look at back at my career and find how did I get into this?
Mhm.
Why do I do what I do? And everybody looks at their. Some people look at their hands and say, I should be a concert pianist, or other people look at your hands and say I should be a plumber or a carpenter, or they just know from I was never blessed. I never had a talent. I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance, I couldn't write, I couldn't all the talents. I was terrible. I couldn't build things. I couldn't hammer a nail. All the things that young people look and take stock to say, I have these talents, what should I do? You know what I could do really well that I've always done, and I'm embarrassed to tell you, but I could spot vulnerabilities. I was when I was a kid, my parents were divorced, and I spent a lot of time on the street. And when you spend a lot of time on the street in the wee small hours, you walk through your neighborhoods and you think, oh, there's an open window. Oh,
Mhm.
there's a car with the car keys in it, and you identify. You develop a natural talent. At least I did. Developed what became, or what I understood later to be a talent for identifying potential weaknesses,
Mhm.
vulnerabilities that could be exploited for personal gain. Now, as I grew up, I thought, well, I could be a really good criminal, or I could be a really good cop.
Yeah.
And I couldn't. I was one of these guys who I thought, well, I can't be a criminal because I can't do time. I just cannot do time. I knew that. I thought I'd be really good. I'd be a mastermind, but I can't. Not if I got caught, I couldn't sit in a cell for 12 hours. It would kill me. And the flip side of that is, I thought, okay, so I'll be a cop. Now, I didn't have the temperament for that. Didn't want to, too authoritarian. This just wasn't me by personality. Couldn't carry a gun. It was too much. So both sides of the coin, I thought, well, but I still have this. I still have this capability. So now when I work with my clients who hire us to go in and look for vulnerabilities that can be exploited by hackers, we're really good at it because I see all the potential open windows and the key under the doors and all these things that people don't recognize as vulnerabilities. I automatically have a sense for it. So I am very attuned to weaknesses, and in this case, cybersecurity weaknesses. And I look at them. I bore people and my wife. My wife doesn't want to listen to me. My grandkids are like, Grandpa, you're too boring. We don't care. And I say, well, there'll come a day when you will care, and then and then it'll be too late. And I don't want to sound so cynical about that, but that is, yeah, when you can see things, when you look at it's like looking at a chessboard and seeing all the potential moves. When you have, and when I look at a computer system and see all the potential ways to hack it, I start to, you either get real passionate about getting good at playing the game or you don't play at all. And so far, I love what I do. I love seeing weaknesses. What's frustrating to me is when people don't address them, and then they come back a year, 2 years, 3 years later, and say, "Yeah, you told me that was going to happen, and I didn't believe you, or I didn't have the money to do anything about it, or the time, or the resource." But it's not a very fulfilling professional because there's a lot of "I told you so's."
Right, right. No, I think that you're really good at spotting vulnerabilities, but I think from this conversation alone, you're also very good at opening people's metaphorical cybersecurity third eye. And that is what I believe to be,
Mm.
the most important thing is anybody who listens to this will at least come out being like, what the F? I'm going to like even myself, I'm just shocked at how much I don't know and how much I need to do, how much I need to learn. Disable all the cookies, download a good VPN, start using DuckDuckGo, start, removing all of the information that I just freely give to social media sites and to regular sites in general. So,
Sorry to interrupt you. I would just, while we talk about DuckDuckGo, a place to look for, I just came to mind. Go type in Privacy Heroes. I think it's privacyheroes.io, but it's an open source organization that's where I got DuckDuckGo and a whole portfolio of freeware that doesn't cost anything. That's very effective for reducing the risk to your personal data. It's called Privacy Heroes. It's all things. It's applications you can download that don't take anything from you, that help you fight the fight.
fantastic. We'll leave all of those links on screen and in the show notes. As a last question to you, Richard, what advice do you have for Gen Z regarding cybersecurity or just in general?
Two words: wake up, wake up. Um, it is real, and it is. I know I've said it many times during this podcast, but um, when it's gone, it's gone, and maybe it's gone for your generation. Maybe it
Mhm.
is, but it's not going to be gone for your kids. And
Yeah,
maybe if you learn the lesson now, you can make their life better and change the course of living a society that sells personal data for business profit. I don't see that happening in your generation. It certainly hasn't happened in mine, which leads to my tone of voice. But wake up, and if you woke up now and took a real, honest appraisal of what you're doing and the benefits that you're reaping, and did a risk rewards calculation, maybe, just maybe, you might find you're paying more than you're getting back. And the quicker you understand that, the better your future will look, and certainly the better future that you'll leave behind. We talk about the legacy, how we screw things up from climate to everything else for our children and their children's children. It's very much a legacy issue in my mind. And we have failed in so many ways in the last 20 years, and that failure now is sitting squarely on your shoulders. And I think rather than neglecting it neglecting the issue, if you just woke up to it and started making little inroads of understanding what's at stake, that you might make or start to make the changes necessary to change and ensure that we all don't end up, you know, part of the Jeff Bezos machine.
absolutely. I mean, I'm very glad that you're here, kind of shouting from the mountaintops about all of these issues because they are important, they are overlooked, and they are extremely important and irreversible,
Yeah.
especially for the long term. Gen Z are digital natives. We've grown up with the internet, and the internet's not going anywhere. So we need to learn, uh, you know, interestingly, how to use the internet in a safe and healthy way. Richard, no, please, you're going to say something.
No, no, no. That's it. We need to know how to use the internet and not allow the internet to use us. That's what I
Absolutely.
was hearing in my head when you said that. So I thought that is a nice way to end this session. But thanks again for having me. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate the format. I appreciate the platform to spout off. You made an old man very happy. Thanks.
You've made a young Gen Z very happy and very curious and with a slight tinge of worry. So, what
Job
I
done.
know we talked about all of the perils of the internet, but where can we find you on social media or on the internet?
I'm not on anything else except LinkedIn. The companies I'm on LinkedIn for company purposes. The name is Richard Hollis. The company's called Risk Crew, riskcrew.com. Again, we're set up for businesses to deliver. But some of these ideas, for instance, we've got some really good white papers about privacy and what's wrong with the cybersecurity industry. You can find on the website riskcrew.com. Other than that, yeah, well, we can put my email address in the show notes. Please, if you got a question, got a complaint, I'd love to hear it. If I can do anything to help any listener who's interested in this topic, do not hesitate to reach out and contact me.
Fantastic. We'll include all of those in the show notes, and I really hope you do more of these podcasts and get this message out there. Richard, thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.